folks, and welcome to this week's show. We've got the Fab Three back in action, and as you can see, I've got Jeremy, Rod, and myself, and no surprises in terms of what we're doing this week's this week's album review on it. It's obviously Talking Heads, the magnificent Talking Heads, who rather lovely have now started talking to each other again and hanging around with each other, and I don't know, it's almost like being a family member and seeing all the family getting back together again happily after a huge family argument when people in the various parts of the family haven't spoken for a while, and then they've sort of all reconvened and sort of got on with it and just sort of said, all right, that's done. Let's sort of make up again. And it's lovely to see. So yeah, absolutely spot on. So as usual, we're going to just go into how we got into Talking Heads and a couple of little points and talking about the 8 studio albums that we are going to review. And then we're going to just dive into the show, folks. So, Jeremy, we'll start with you. How did you sort of get into Talking Heads and when?
Well, I was born in 1964. So when the whole CBGB thing was happening, I was a little bit on the young side. I couldn't go to CBGBs to see Talking Heads or Blondie or the Ramones. I certainly was aware what was happening. And I had a distinct memory of my sister walking around the house. She's 18 months older than me, singing Psycho Killer. And I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. But that might have just been part of the sibling dynamic. So I kind of didn't pay much attention to them. But then when the Take Me to the River cover came on my radio, I fell in love. I thought that I had no idea who Al Green was, did not hear his version first, just thought it was fantastic. In fact, I know I loved it because it's on one of those cassettes I made from the radio back in 1978. So at that point, I started to get real interested in them. And I also had a friend who was a mentor on the cutting edge of all music, a little bit older than me, and he got Fear of Music. And we put that on and our minds were just... So from that moment on, I really was a total, complete, utter fan. Very lucky to see them on the Stop Making Sense tour.
Oh,
at Forest Hills. My sister and I went, reconciled.
Yeah.
Both of us love the Talking Heads.
Not envious at all.
Yes.
We saw that gig at Forest Hills and were just, knocked out. Obviously, they had their ups and downs personally and also with their output, which is what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, lovely. That's really, really good. Rod, how about yourself?
Well, I was born a year before Jeremy, 63. So again, I was still quite young. I was, 14 when the album came out, but kind of 14, 15 area. But my brother, a bit like Jeremy, had a mentor. My brother was a bit of a mentor to me because he was 5 years older than me. So he was kind of 19, 20. And he knew who they were because he was quite into music. And I just heard him playing them. And I thought, wow, that doesn't sound like anybody else. But was sort of captivating in a way that was just, well, they are unique, and it was you knew that they sounded pretty unique, and then I remember seeing them on the Old Grey Whistle Test, I think, which is a big show still at that time, and they played live in the studio. They definitely played Psycho Killer, probably a couple of the tracks off the debut album, and again live they were just, especially David Byrne, he had this sort of intense stare, and you were just a bit like Joy Division in a way. You were a bit transfixed and thought, God, these are something weirdly special about this band, even though I was young, and it just drew me in. And then a bit like Jeremy, I've always liked them ever since, and I was a fan kind of immediately, I suppose, and I've remained one, to be honest.
Yeah, it's the same with me as well. I always remember once in a lifetime, because I'm slightly younger than yourselves, not by much but enough. And I think it was once in a lifetime. And then I think I remember definitely watched watched Talking Heads on the Whistle Test, but I think it was a repeat.
Yeah.
And it's always Psycho Killer that they show. And I remember watching that thing that was great. And then I remember doing Psycho Killer in a band because it was just one of them things that he did. And I still sing it every now and again myself these days, but it's just a great song. And so I think that's what sort of got me into them. It was years later, though, that I got into the really funk stuff. Although bizarrely, I got into the Talking Heads. I got into David Byrne and Brian Eno before then, rather oddly. Ghost in the Machine. So it was it's odd. It's odd. My relationship.
Ghosts, yeah.
Yeah, and I really loved Ghost of the police there. And then I got I was really into Naked bizarrely, it was the album that I really, really liked in '88. I thought, yeah, I really, really like that. Played it a lot. I thought Blind was fabulous, for example.
Yeah, I love
And then
Blind.
a little bit of a hiatus, and then probably over the last 10 years, got massively into them. Never saw them live, absolutely gutted. Would love to go and see them. Yeah, they're just a fabulous band, and I just want to say the rhythm section is fantastic.
Mhm.
Chris France and Tina Weymouth are just
Yeah.
superb. Yes, they're a couple, but musically they're a couple as well. They're just superb. They lock in so well, so well.
Yeah, Chris France is
She's a
just
great
unreal.
she's a
Yeah.
great bass player. She's so underrated. Really, really, really tasty bass player in terms of what she plays.
Mhm.
So there's my story there. Yeah, just love him. Great, great band. One of my favorites. And he's got such an unusual voice. It's a bit like Ferry, where it's so distinct. You hear it, and you know exactly who it is straight away, isn't it? You know, with David Byrne, you go, oh
And he's
wow.
not a great. He's like Bowie. He's like Bowie as well. He's not a great singer.
So I'd argue otherwise about Bowie being a great singer. I think he is, but I could argue
Yeah,
that I
that's
can
a
accept
tale
that
for
with
another
Ferry
day.
though, definitely.
I meant
You
I meant
know?
in a classical sense. You know,
Yeah.
vocal coaches wouldn't say they were, technically fantastic singers, but they are great singers because they match the music that they make so perfectly.
But
And
Ferry, I definitely concur on that front. Like, but
yeah, and
yeah,
they're similar in that sense, I think.
yeah,
Yeah,
very, very distinctive, very, very distinctive.
yeah.
Uh, so right, let's go for it. Before we start, folks, and we do our albums and we go through all the albums, we're going to just do the ranking slide here. So I'm just going to go through the reviews, and 5 stars equals a masterpiece, as you can see on the screen there. 4.5 is a classic album. 4 is excellent. 3.5 is very good. 3 is good. 2.5 is fair. 2 weak. 1.5 very poor. I doubt very much we're going to get 1 star awful and don't bother at 0.5. And we're just going to do the studio albums. We're not doing the live albums either. So we're just focusing on the 8 studio albums, which seems very sparse the amount of time they're together as well, doesn't it? 8 albums is not a lot, but there you have it. So we're going to start off with Jeremy. So, Jeremy, when you're ready, what have you got on it?
My number 8 Talking Heads album is True Stories. I give it 2 stars. It was a massive disappointment when it came out. I made some notes here. I just felt there was a continuation of the back to basics approach from Little Creatures, but it was somehow turned smug, like they were superior to everyone for what they were doing. And I think that's, something that Byrne can shade into a little bit, that superiority. The songs are less memorable than the ones on Little Creatures. His singing he's doing this growling thing on several songs, which is really annoying. I don't know, because maybe he's doing it because the songs seem to lack energy and he's trying to give them, like, boost them up a little bit. And then there's a song in there called Papa Legba, which is one of the least funky songs of all time. And the leaden sound of that song, it's just astonishing from a band that really achieved liftoff so well on their best work. Love for Sale and Wild Wild Life are good songs. I would put those on the Talking Heads career spanning playlist for sure. And the graphic design was beautiful. I was lucky enough to work a little bit with the company that made that,
Oh,
M and Company. Really fantastic visual thinkers, and the cover looks great. That could be part of the reason why I've kept my copy of it, which I bought unheard, brand new, because it was the new Talking Heads album.
okay. Wow. Damn, I'm amazed we started at 2. Okay, that's interesting. Wow, so low. Rod, what have you got at number 8?
Yeah, I concur with Jeremy. I've got True Stories at 8 as well. And I think just compared to the other 7, it is disappointing. I think it's quite, the strength of the songs is quite lightweight, really. I think, obviously Wild Wild Life would get in their greatest hits and maybe a couple of others. The other note I'd made is that my favorite band, as I've alluded to in other shows, is Radiohead. And they named themselves after a song on this album.
Yeah, they did.
A fairly unmemorable, sort of fairly average Radiohead song. But I'll give an extra half a star for that, maybe. But it was a concept album, wasn't it? I think I read, because
yes.
he made
there was a movie, and then
made
there's
a movie, yeah,
about
tabloid stories, didn't he? About American life and all the rest of it, and then obviously made an album that tied in with that. But it's hardly Dark Side of the Moon, is it? I mean, it's a concept album, but it's a bit, yeah. disappointing is a good word, Jeremy, really, I suppose, from there, because of their ability and the other stuff they've done. It's yeah, I can't really say much more. I do agree with what Jeremy said pretty much, and yeah, that's why it's their least successful album. I'd give it probably. Do you give it a 2?
Yeah.
Right, I'd go 2.5. What's 2.5? Sorry, Sid, remind me.
2.5 is fair.
Yeah, 2.5. It's not quite good. 3 is good. I'd give it 2.5 probably. Yeah.
Right. Oh, I tell you what, we're going to have some disagreements, I suspect. Because right, okay, that's interesting.
A quirky band might make quirky results.
Well, that's good, and that's the whole purpose of this, for people to go, "Oh my God, that's how wrong can you be?" And you're definitely going to disagree with some of mine. So I've gone in at straight. My number 8 is Little Creatures, which I think is a good album. Actually, I've given it 3 stars straight away. There's nothing less than 3 stars for me. I mean, there's some super pop songs on it. I mean, And She Was is fabulous. Road to Nowhere is one of the best pop songs of all time. You know, it really is unbelievable. There's some great songs on it. Give Me Back My Name. It's got like a magazine feel, which is about Mark and Max, which I really like. Creature of Love, good country pop song, which I like. The Lady Don't Mind reminds me of sort of later Roxy music. I think it's a good album. I think it's a good, solid pop album. I think it's possibly their most pop album of all the albums that they do. It's definitely slightly changed the feel from some of the rhythmic stuff that they did earlier on. And it's definitely their attempt at pop music. So I think it's a good, solid album, and I've given it 3 stars. I just think it's a little bit all right in places. So 3 stars, good album. So definitely going to be different. Jerry, what have you got at 7?
Number 7, I have Naked with 3 stars. Their last album, it was a bit of a return to form in some ways. The first 5 songs are almost a complete delight, but they also sound very calculated in the sounds they're appropriating in a way that their best work did not, when they involved African and funk rhythms. This feels very like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And the second half of the album is very dreary. I just found myself drifting off. I never actually bought this album. I have most of the songs on that CD box set that's about this long. So I have it, and my brother had it, and I think I taped it from him. Blind is fantastic. That horn arrangement is just killer. And they do some great stuff with Latin music, but it does feel a bit calculating. Good album, though.
So how many stars did you say? 3?
3.
Yeah, okay. Rod, what have you got at number 7?
7, I've got more songs about buildings and food, which I know is quite critically acclaimed, and I haven't really got the other 7. They haven't got a bad album anyway, personally. But the songs just it's got Take Me to the River on it, which I think Jeremy mentioned in his opening gambit, which is probably up there with All Along the Watchtower and a few other. It's one of the best covers probably of all time, arguably. You know, it just is. I mean, Al Green is a great artist, but they just did their own thing, and it's a fantastic song. And but it is a cover version, and it's the best. That's the best song on the album. It's the cover version, and then the Big Country I like a lot, and it's a slide guitar, and the whole vibe and feel of that song is fantastic, I think. But overall, the songs grab me a little bit less than the other albums, I think. You know, the rest of the songs grab me a little bit less, I think. I think it was the first time they worked with Eno, wasn't it? This album, was it? Did they work with Eno on this album? I think the first time.
Yes, it is. That's the first Eno album. Yeah.
Because I think he'd just done Low with David Bowie not that long before.
Yeah, Low and Heroes.
And
yeah,
you can tell
just
that because
Heroes.
You know, to go from 77 album, the 1977 album, to this, the production is much more sophisticated and fuller and much more polished. The sound is, you can tell they're the same band, but the production just is completely different. You know, it's much slicker and much better in that regard. Which is, you'd think because of that you might put it ahead of 77, but I prefer the songs on 77 and the overall feel. So, yeah, that's why that's number 7 for me. And I give it 3.5 stars.
Okay, right. That's interesting to hear. My number 7 is Naked. it's a terrific album. It's also got Johnny Marr on. I think the Smiths had split up at this point, and Johnny Marr's a sort of musician for hire because he just played with Brian Ferry as well, and he's almost like a part-time musician on this album. It's on about 4 of the tracks. There's some great songs on this. I really think there's some really underrated tracks on this. Blind is so catchy. It's so funky. It's just brilliant. I love Mr. Jones. I love the Latin style on it. Totally new the African groove on it. It's got a real mishmash of styles on this album, which might be to its detriment to it at times. Ruby Deer, not bad. Nothing But Flowers. Smith-type rhythms, ironically. Democratic Circus. I've just got written Dark. Sounds like Cousin Kevin by The Who. There's some really dark songs on this album. I mean, Big Daddy's dark and sinister, about sex, apparently. Dark song. I've got Bill, got dark song. I've got Cool Water, dark song written on it. It's just it's quite a dark album. There's some really bleak things on it, you know. You can sort of tell in some respects that the band is sort of disintegrating as well. But it is still really, really good and really catchy in equal measure. It's a really good album. It's a 3.5-star album for me. I think a little bit of trimming and it could have been higher. I just think there's a couple of tracks they could have just removed off it and it would have been a better album. More isn't always better. So there we have it. That's my number 7. What have we got at number 6, Jeremy?
Number 6, and this might be a little bit of a surprise, is the debut, Talking Heads 77. While I did obviously grow to love Psycho Killer and many of the songs on the album, I find there's the thin, wiry sound and the strained vocals get a little tedious after a while. I think the producer was Tony Bon Jovi, John Bon Jovi's cousin. He was more versed in funk, and he actually had done some work with the Ramones. But I just feel like the production doesn't do them any favors. It's very, very thin. That said, there's some great songs on there. Obviously, Psycho Killer, Uh-Oh, Love Comes to Town, New Feeling, Pulled Up. They're just so kind of joyous and oddly joyous, though. They're like coming at happiness from an oblique angle and just so much fun. I also love their first single before Jerry Harrison joined the band. It's really great. It has early versions of some of these songs on here when they were just a trio. But on the whole, I sometimes find myself getting a little impatient listening to the whole album. So I gave it 3.5 stars. It's a very good album. It's just not the best.
Interesting. Okay, well, we shall see. Rod, what have you got next?
Well, that's a snap from me. I've got 1977 at 6 as well. Was it 6 or 5? 6.
6.
6, yeah. So same as Jeremy. It's a really good album. It's a fantastic debut album. At the end of the day, it's a debut album, you know. And Psycho Killer is a classic indie anthem, top tier classic indie anthem of all time for the ages, really. And you know, you can't knock it for that. And I love Pulled Up, which to me sounds a bit like, they're probably my 2 favorite songs, obviously, but Pulled Up sounds a bit like it's like a cross between, I've written a cross between Devo and the Cars. It's slightly mad in a sound. It's slightly manic sort of, but it's musical. It sounds like a mix between those two. It's just got a really good vibe to that song. But I'd agree with Jeremy that, and maybe it was deliberate to sound a bit like a garage band album in the sense that it was thin, bit of a homemade sound almost, but it was quite trendy to do that then. You know, Gang of Four, Television, early XTC, first couple of albums, you know, they sound like that. And maybe Talking Heads were like a US sort of sound of that ilk, maybe. So it might have been deliberate. And of the time, I think it probably worked. But I would agree with Jeremy in the sense that a lot of them sound a bit samey as well. You know, there's less colours on it. There's less light and dark sort of shade. And it's maybe a little bit monotonous. And I struggle to listen to it all the way through as much as the others, I think, which is probably why it's a wee bit lower. But I'd still give it 4. I've given it 4 then, because again, only because I think the quality of their albums really is pretty high. So it'd still be a 4 for me, I think.
Yeah, Well, we've got a hat, Rick, because that's my number 6 as well, and same reasons as you. It's funny for me. It's because my dad had a hairdresser shop at the tap for many years, and when I used to go in, in the early 80s, that bloody album was played all the time. It was always 1977 being played. It'll be that of Vienna by Ultravox, which I love, by the way, is a great album. And it was on incessantly. But it's a really good album. It is thin, and I totally agree with Rod. I've got XTC in massive letters written on here, and I see XTC for quite a while as almost being the English version. I think they're very similar bands. I mean, the fact that they toured together as well is sort of significant, and they're very, very good friends. Chris Franz's book, he talks massively about Andy Partridge and how great he is and what a great band they are. So there's a real comparison.
Like a synergy.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's a better word.
The subject matter of their songs is quite similar.
Very, very, very much.
Urban themes, buildings, mundanity.
Yeah,
there's a lot of crossover. I think
absolutely. And what was interesting in Chris Franz's book, he got really annoyed about the first album in terms of when it came out, because of the fact that David Byrne claimed all the credit. And apparently, that's not the case. Chris Franz wrote at least half the lyrics on the album. Tina Weymouth wrote most of Psycho Killer in terms of the words and stuff. David Byrne obviously came up with the catchy hook, as it were, but she came up with a big chunk of it. And so most of the songs were written by the band, not just by David Byrne. So he's really miffed, and that's one of the big things. And that's why I thought they'd never ever speak again when his book came out, because his book is really damning, and it's a fascinating book to go and listen to or read. Fabulous, but it is hard. But some great songs on it. Now, just some quick notes here. You've done a lot of them, like Love Comes to Town is just fantastic. New Feeling, I've just got written XTC. Happy Days, great Angular song. Who Is It? Very XTC, funky and cool. Don't Worry About the Government, I've got written in here, Cockney Rebel sound and feel to it. Yeah. And then obviously Psycho Killer is just a great song. It's a super album, really, really lovely album. Can't recommend it enough, but it's definitely a 4-star album. I totally agree with Rod. I've given it 4, so we're at 4 stars already. Fabulous album, really good album, underrated. So what have we got at number 5 then, Jeremy?
I have Little Creatures from 1985. I give it 3.5 stars. It was a bit of a shock to the system to hear this very, as I called it before, back to basics approach without any of the Eno-isms and funk rhythms, but the songwriting is very, very good. Songs like And She Was, Stay Up Late, obviously Road to Nowhere, just incredible. And there was a certain way that they reconnected with the first 2 albums on this record, with that slightly nervy, wiry sound. But I remember feeling a little bit like when they produced the album themselves, the rhythm section is so clinically produced and there's very little swing. Obviously, Chris Franz is a drummer who can do anything, and one of his great features is his steady rhythm, but I almost felt like I just wanted to hear a little bit more ghost notes or something in there that would just kind of give a little more flexibility to the songs. It's very kind of square rhythmically, but it's a really great album. I like it a lot. And ironically, it's their #1 selling album. Well, maybe not ironically, because it is so pop, but it's their best-selling album in the United States. Also, it was Album of the Year in the Village Voice, but I'm looking at the review scores and it's all over the map. It's kind of crazy. Rolling Stone gave it 2 stars.
Wow. Whoa.
But then, and Chicago Tribune 2.5 stars. Pitchfork gives it 8 out of 10 in a retrospective review. All Music 4.5. So it's obviously a bit of a divisive album, and there it sits right in the middle of my ranking, still in the bottom 4, but a very good album.
So what have you given it?
I gave it 3.5 stars.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's a good album. Very good album. Rod, what have you got in at number 5?
I've got Naked at 5. I used to, a bit like you, so I used to listen to it quite a lot. Had the album on CD, I think, rather than vinyl, but I did used to play it a lot. I think in the car. I just remember playing it. Like Blind's just such a powerful, just like a force of nature. It's funky, but it's just so powerful. It just grabbed you by the throat, but in a good way. And I absolutely love Blind. It's one of my favourite Talking Head songs, probably. And also, I love Nothing But Flowers, which I think Johnny Marr plays a 12-string. I read somewhere on that particular song. It's just got and I like the lyrics, and that it's sort of about a futuristic situation where there's nothing but flowers and it's all green and all that. But it's like the opposite of an environmental song. So songs usually about the environment, like that's quite a conventional thing. Whereas they've turned it on its head and sort of like it's this futuristic thing where someone everything's green, there's nothing but flowers. But he wishes everything was urban again. It's kind of in reverse. It's just like a really good idea of a song. Plus, it's just a well constructed song, I think, and the horn sections throughout the album is quite jazzy. It's Latin, like you said earlier. There's lots of different. I take the point about the sort of maybe slightly contrived or sort of, I don't know, clinical aspect to it because they've done it before, and I think that they might have suffered a little bit there because the other ones were when they did African stuff on and those sort of themes on earlier albums like Remain in Light and Fear of Music and stuff. It was fresh and new, and no one had ever done it before. And then because they've already done it before, is it quite as good? But I think some of the songs do stand up. I think they are as good, as some of the songs of a similar ilk on earlier albums.
Not as egregious as Graceland by Paul Simon.
Sorry?
I said it's not as egregious as Paul Simon's Graceland.
No, that's true. That's a fair point. The other thing I wanted to mention about Naked was because, a bit like with Tom York, I think because it's later on, some of his vocals are probably the best vocals. As in vocals. Harmonious.
Just a more experienced singer. Yeah.
Because he was thin and squeaky and high and kind of deliberately quirky, obviously. He's got a very quirky voice, but he sings on Naked more than probably any other album, melodically. And I think he's got, they're his best vocals, I think, out of any album. So yeah, that's 5. And I gave it 4, I think.
Yeah,
4.
okay.
Yeah. The same as the previous album, yeah.
Well, yeah. My number 5 is True Stories, and I've given it 4 stars. I think it's a really, really good album. Yes, shocks indeed. Yeah, and this I really love it. It's got a real different feel to it. It's much more at times like a rock album, but then at times it's like a country album. I mean, a big shout out to Tommy Morello and Pedal Steel on this album. He's fabulous. I mean, the guitar on Love for Sale is great. I love the opening track. It's fabulous. I think there's some really clever stuff on it. Puzzling Evidence. I love the gospel choir on it. And it's about fake news, that sort of thing. Papa Legba is a good song, but the bonus version with Pop Staples on is much better. And I wish that was on the album because that is a great version. And I've got that in big brackets there because that version is infinitely better. And he's such a good singer.
Where is that available?
It's actually one of the bonus tracks that they've got on now.
Oh, is it? I've never heard.
Go and check the 2 bonus tracks, so they're better than on the album by quite a bit, and it would bump the album up significantly. Wild Wild Life, great song. Radiohead, it's a good song. It's a poppy world music thing. Dream Operator, decent. I love People Like Us. I like the country twang on it. And City of Dreams, I've just written killer song. I absolutely love it with a really catchy chorus. I really like this album. It's always bottom of the lists, and I really like it. So I've given it 4 stars. So I'm not going to apologize for it. I like it. So True Stories, 4 stars for me. What have you got at number 4, Jeremy?
I have More Songs About Building Some Food, the 1978 sophomore album. I give it 4.5 stars. Thank you, Brian Eno, for giving them a richer, more dimensional sound. Burns' singing is more confident. Jerry Harrison has really fit himself into the band with the keyboards. And when you think about the keyboard arrangement on Take Me to the River, it's absolutely astonishing. Not to mention the drum sound on that, which only Eno could have gotten. Intriguingly, I think they actually take from the Brian Ferry version of the song rather than the Al Green version of the song, because the Brian Ferry version came out a little bit before theirs on The Bride Stripped Bare.
Well, what's interesting as well is I think in the book, and please quote me if I'm wrong, folks, I'm pretty sure that they supported Brian Ferry at about the same time, solo, and I know they supported. I think they supported Roxy as well, but I'm pretty sure they did. And I think it's the other way around. It's the other way around. It's the other way around because they did it live and Ferry heard them and then went and recorded it.
Oh, is that right?
That's right, yeah. So
interesting.
It is fascinating, and it's quite clever because Franz mentions
their arrangement, and then but their arrangement is obviously a little bit more artsy than his. His is great though.
Yeah, it
I love
is
the
very good.
version. But yeah, so there's not a bad song on the album, but it's got several standouts. Found a Job, Artists Only, Stay Hungry. Really, really good songs, really interesting, energetic, edgy. I feel like they were really connecting to their life experience on that record. Great cover. It's just a really, really good album. Like I said, 4.5 stars. I don't really have anything bad to say about it. A couple of the songs are less distinct, which may be why it sits here rather than.
Andy Partridge as well is also supposedly is the one who came up with the title of the album. So that sort of sounds
Exactly.
about
It's kind of like a criticism almost. Here you got more songs about buildings and food.
right. So Rod, what have you got at number 4?
Number 4, I've got Little Creatures at 4. But I think Jeremy mentioned most of the things. I kind of agree. It's less complex than the other albums. I've just put down that it's much simpler. It's less layered. But then again, it's more accessible because of that, which is probably why I guess I wasn't actually aware, Jeremy, that it was the best-selling album. Allowing we've got it not that near the top of ours by the look. Although I can't remember if you had it yet. Said you might.
Yeah, I've done it. Mine was much lower down.
Yeah, but they've sold lots of copies and more than the other album. But it's because it's more. I guess it is more accessible. But the songs are simple, and She Was and Road to Nowhere would be up there with all their songs. They're like almost like a white gospel choir kind of effect on both of those songs. They're just very effective techniques, aren't they? Which they use quite a lot on this album. But it's just a solid album but their least complex album. And I've given it four stars as well. Actually, that's 3 4s on the trot, isn't it? So there's only fag papers between these, really.
Yeah, I agree.
All on a similar level, I think. And I've just had to, just sort of rank them because they're all on the same ranking. I'm just sort of, I like that one slightly better than that one, and probably like that one. It's close, but yeah, 4 stars, Little Creatures.
Well, for me now, I've hit 5-star territory from 4 inwards, and over the last few weeks, every one of these has been number 1. So until a couple of hours earlier, I didn't know what I had at number 1, and it could have easily, and I'll openly admit this, it could have been easily any one of these, and I have no complaints whatsoever. So today, my number 4 is Fear of Music. Came out in 79, quite a shift in many respects. It's got all the polyrhythms and grooves on it. It's fabulous. It really is a great album. If you want to get to Talking Heads, this is not the album to listen to, though. This is what I would definitely say, because I think it's quite a hard one to sort of get into immediately. But it really hits you when it does. I mean, Zimbra, I love it. Robert Fripp's guitar, I love the groove, I love the rhythms. There's so many good rhythms on this album. It's just fabulous. What have I got written here? A Paper, great riff. Cities, fabulous bass line on it. Great groove. Life During Wartime, just a great song. Could be about the band. Could be about Life During Wartime. I'm not really sure. I've got Memories Can Wait, and I've got written in brackets here, it's got a Massive Attack type of groove to it. And you can see some of their later influence as well, how they've influenced other bands. Air could be about somebody being agoraphobic. Heaven's quite sarcastic. Animals has almost got like a Tom Waits feel to it, is what I've written here. And Drugs, pretty straightforward. But it's really great. The rhythm is fabulous. It's just something I wasn't expecting. If you were listening in chronological order, and you can see the influence of 2 without a doubt, the second album. But this one is such a leap in some respects. It's so different. And you think, wow, that is really brave. I love it when bands are brave and they do something really out there, because it certainly does not fit in with that new wave sort of thing that they were labeled as at the time. You would not describe this album, Fear of Music, as a new wave album. It's new, but it's new style music. It's fabulous. 5 stars all day long. Classic album. So, Jeremy, what have we got at 3?
Number 3 is Speaking in Tongues, 1983. The third in an astonishing trilogy. I give it 5 stars. It's fun, it's funky, it's inventive, occasional touches of 80s sonics, maybe date it just a hair, but it really recovers from all of those. They produced it themselves. Maybe Eno would have sanded off some of those more traditional 80s sounds on it. But when you think about how good this album is, Burning Down the House, Slippery People, speaking of pop staples, the Staple Singers did an amazing cover. I
Yeah.
have the 12-inch of that song. This Must Be the Place, absolutely gorgeous. And I have a very special memory of this album because you can see I bought the Rauschenberg cover, but I also bought the cassette, and I had a terrible job summer of 1983. I was working the 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift at Lindy's Bagel Eatery in the Public Authority bus terminal of New York. Even if you've never been to New York, you've been to a bus terminal, and you don't want to be in a bus terminal at 6 in the morning.
No.
Especially in the wake of the 70s when there were still, I mean, well, it's not great now, but there's a lot of homeless people around. We saw all kinds of things, not to mention the incredible pressure of serving all those commuters their coffee and bagel in the morning. But there I'd be on the subway platform with my Walkman on, Burning Down the House. It would just get me there. It was very helpful in that regard. I just think it's a brilliant album. Obviously, the packaging is just astonishing. One of the best packaged records of all time. Rauschenberg won a Grammy for that. And it's yellowed a bit, as you can see, but I still absolutely love it. Just a wonderful, wonderful album. And it continued on from Remain in Light, but it's like a little more poppy, a little more accessible. And it was just so cool to see them get really big with that record.
Great stuff. Great choice. Can I say great choice? We're into 5-star territory there. Rod, what have you going? Hit 3.
Yeah, 3. I've got Fear of Music. Yeah, you've sort of covered that because it's my top 3 are 5-star albums as well. Actually, again, they could all be interchangeable, really.
Yeah.
But life during wartime, I mean, I'm not quite sure it's about. Who cares? It's Ace, isn't it? You know, who cares what it's about? It's just a fantastic song, isn't it? It's sort of the driving relentlessness of it. I just love that song. It's fantastic, and Heaven's probably one of my favourite Talking Head songs because it's just so not like a Talking Head song. They don't do ballads, do they?
No.
It's like an exquisite. I've written exquisite ballad, which is unlike Talking Heads, but it's fantastic. Even his vocals are good on it. You know, it's about a bar, wasn't it? They're in a bar called Heaven. Him and friends probably. But anyway, yeah. But it's just sarcastic thing, isn't it? Like when nothing ever happens, and then just the whole analogy with heaven itself, and it's just a fantastic song. But the whole album just sounds great. The production of it's fantastic. You know, the beats, and it's sort of comically dark, some of the lyrics as well, aren't they? It's like there's a dark comic genius to it, which all plays into the whole fear of music, if you know what I mean. So I think as a package, it's just, I think that all their top 3 albums they're just complete fantastic albums that are just put together fantastically well. It hasn't really got a bad track on it. Maybe it should have been higher. Anyway, no, it's number 3. I was almost promoting it higher. But it is a 5-star album.
Yeah,
it really is.
Brilliant. Well, my number 3 is More Songs About Buildings and Food, and it was number 1 a couple of days ago. It's Brian Eno's on it. It's in terms of sort of helping production and that, and doing some noodling. But it's just a great album, and it does have quite a bit of the rhythmic thing going on. It's quite a big jump from the first album for me. I do really like it. I think it's definitely got that XTC groove to it as well, like drums and wires. But it's actually, I'm going to say this, controversially better than drums and wires. I think Thanks for Sending Me an Angel is just a great opener with Our Love's got a lovely, complex, rhythmic beat. Love it. 25 years ago, what was I looking at? Like, hold on, yeah. Sorry, I was reading my notes there. I'll skip that. What was it? The Girls Want to Be with the Girls is great. which Tina said was based on a conversation she had with Dave, and he basically used the conversation for lyrics, which I thought was quite funny. Found a Job is fantastic. It's one of my favorites. It's got a real James Brown sort of link and feel to it, but it's almost got like Buzzcocks type lyrics, which I like. I thought was quite clever. I'm Not in Love. Great. Take Me to the River, as we've already said, it's fabulous and Big Country, just brilliant. It's a top album. There's nothing on this that I don't like. I love the rhythms. I love the vocal delivery. I love the style where it sometimes goes off kilter slightly and just works superbly. It's a top-notch album. It's a 5-star album for me. So that's my number 3. What have we got in at number 2 then, Jeremy?
That's my turn to mention Fear of Music. I give it 5 stars. Like I said, just hearing E Zimbra blew my mind so entirely. The fact that they could have these nonsense lyrics taken from Dada poetry, just crazy. And there's a great range on the album, though, when you think about, that song is funky and polyrhythmic, but then Life During Wartime, which maybe even better on the dance floor because it just rocks so hard and you want to move to it, and the lyrics are just incredible. And then Drugs, I realized later on, maybe they were being influenced by some of the later Scott Walker stuff, Night Flights and things like that, because it's so dark and draggy, and it really kind of makes you feel like you're altered.
I think Chris Frantz came up with the lyrics as well. He wrote a lot of the lyrics and doesn't get credit for them on a lot of albums.
Yeah.
Which he points out in his book, apparently.
He mentions all the time in his book. Which is fair enough. If somebody took your lyrics,
fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
And I also just love these, the songs, Mind, Paper, Cities, Drugs, Air, Heaven. It's just this very
I meant to mention that earlier, Jeremy. I said it might be a world record for an album that's got the most single tracks on it ever.
I also, and they're also bringing in minimalism, like Steve Reich, a bit on, just the way that first song just sits in that space. So I remember being in the car with my mom, and she was like, "Is the tape stuck? Is something wrong? Because nothing's happening." Like it made her a little uncomfortable. She did not like minimalism. She didn't like Reich or Glass or anything like that. So this was a bit much for her. But the idea that they're like bringing these influences from classical music, funk, it's just one of the greatest albums of all time. And once again, another great cover with the texture of this steel plate on the original vinyl. I absolutely love it. I'm never tired of listening to it. It's just so good.
Great. Rod, what have you got at number 2?
Number 2, I've got Remain in Light up to. Obviously, it's often cited as a GOAT album, greatest of all time album. It's in some circles. It's in those conversations, isn't it? And quite rightly, it's a short album. It's only 8 tracks, which is a pretty short album by most standards. They're not long. I don't know what the total length is, but it's just an expertly crafted, piece of music, isn't it? You can't argue that. Brian Eno again, wasn't it? Very complex. The introduction of sort of African sounds and different types of percussion, and it was. I mean, Cross-Eyed and Painless. I've made notes. It's just I love that song. Just the rhythm of it. It's just so unique. Well, I know they are unique, but just certain tracks of theirs are just. Well, even Once in a Lifetime, although it was a big hit. I mean, even now you could put that onto someone now who'd never heard it before, and you'd think, well, what is that?
Yeah.
It's just so original. It sounds original. I've heard it 100 times, and if I hadn't heard it for say 6 months, I'd put it on. I'd still think, even though I've heard it, I'd still think it sounds original, and I've heard it 100 times. So that's how. I suppose that's a testament to how, special they are. Really, I suppose as a band to be able to make a song. And when you think how quirky that song is, Once in a Lifetime, the spoken word part of it, the sort of stop-start, sort of unusual structure. Yeah, it got into the top 10 or the top 20, of the singles chart, on both sides of the Atlantic. And you think, that could never happen now. That's just mad to think that. And I just think that, I mean, it's a 5-star album, and it's number 2, but it could easily have been number 1, really. It's just, It's just awesome. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I sort of almost flipped a coin for my number one and two. Honestly, I was so stuck between one. I'm still stuck now, if I'm honest. I've gone. I'm debating which one to go with. I'll go with what I've written down. This is how torn I am. I've got Speaking in Tongues written down here, but it could easily be the other way around. Now My Nicino, which I think they benefit from. Actually, I've written it's a more spacious, slightly more uplifting album from '83. And again, this sounds not like nothing from 1983 in some respects, because apart from some of the old funk sort of type bands, I always think of when I think of this in times, I think of like bands like Imagination and that sort of funk bass that they've got going on. Love it, love it. So they've got that. That's a lovely cover, lovely bit of vinyl.
You're showing off now, Jeremy.
Showing off it is, but we
I
love
forgot to
it.
show it before,
We
so
love
while
it.
you're talking.
And it's got that sort of keyboard funk bass on occasions. It's lovely. It's such a big, fat, rich sort of sound, as well as a normal, magnificent bass playing. It's just great, and I love it. I think it's got a real groove on this album. Burn Down the House, we've said, brilliant. Uh, Chris Francis says he had the title from a P-Funk gig when they were chanting it, burning down the house. So he then sort of came back with the title and they started working out the riff for it, and then the rest added to it. Making Flippy Floppies about sex and politics. Girlfriend is Better, great, catchy tune. Slippery People, religious connotations. Great song, funky as hell, though it really, really is. I Get Wild. It's got like a reggae feel to it. I really like that. That was quite in vogue as well in '83, which people seem to forget about.
Yeah.
And About Getting High, Chris Franz wrote the lyrics to it. Swamp is about capitalism and the nuclear holocaust, which again, people forget. 83, 84, 85 was massively into that. That was the sort of in theme. I remember John Lydon did the song Time Zone. Was it Time Zone he did with African Bambaataa?
Right.
Which was great in '84, and that's sort of the same sort of theme. Moon Rocks about eating edible cannabis, which is a story about something that they did. And Plug the Roots, really catchy. Wow, what a great groove that is. And then This Must Be the Place. It's quite a light song, but it's happy and it's a lovely song to sort of finish off on. It's just great, great album. Easily could have been my number one, as you can tell by my dithering and sort of thinking, what the hell shall I do there? Just great, though. Fabulous album. 5 stars all day long. Jeremy, what's your number one then?
Number one, if you're keeping track, has got to be Remain in Light. One of those albums that I feel like it changed my life, like rhythmically from that downbeat at the beginning, and you're just like moving. You can't sit still. You get up out of your chair, dancing. And it was a very important time in my life when it came out. So there's that, where I was in a band, we were working things out, we were trying to make our own music and just debating things so heavily. What do these lyrics mean? It was so telegraphic in some of the lyrics. So say, turning just regular conversation into chants that were memorable. Obviously, all the songs are just fantastic, but the first side one is completely unimpeachable. It just goes 1, 2, 3. 3 songs are a little bit longer than some of their other stuff, but just the great curve with Adrian Belew on there, wailing away like he was for Bowie just shortly before that. And side 2, it starts with Once in a Lifetime, which was this offbeat pop hit, had a great video, which helped obviously, but those lyrics are just so clever and quotable and relatable in some way. Houses in Motion has got that John Hassel, and I loved the John Hassel Eno album. I don't know if you know that one, Fourth World Volume 1, Possible Music. It's one of my favorite albums of that time. So hearing him on there, but in a little bit more of an art rock context rather than an ambient context. And I feel like it does take a little bit of a dip in terms of sheer inspiration in the last 3 songs, but just minor, nothing to take it away from being a complete and utter classic album. Some people complain about the overload. I love that. Once again, it's kind of like drugs, and in some ways it's sequenced a little bit like Fear of Music. just have this draggy, but it's
Yeah.
just, on the listening wind, you can't really complain about it. It's a fascinating song, Mojik. It just really grabs you. The fact that they got from, in 3 years, from the spindly, spiny, wiry to this incredible explosion of rich music is just astonishing. One of the greatest leaps, I think, in rock history. And the cool thing is that I don't have the original album. I have this white label promo copy, and it came with all these papers that detailed their like bibliography of stuff they were reading about African music and art film and stuff that influenced it. So that kind of helped me appreciate how they got there. Of course, what we didn't know is that he and Eno had already made My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. It was sitting in the vaults. They weren't sure how to release it. I don't think anybody was interested in their weird experiments with recorded preachers and funk grooves.
Which is a great album, by the way, folks.
Oh
So
my
go and
God,
listen
it's
to that. Yeah.
incredible. It's absolutely incredible. I love that album. It came out a year later. I think
Yes, came
people
out in
saw
81. Yeah.
this one smashed the barriers, and they were like, oh, maybe people will want to listen to that. And that's a hugely influential album when you think about hip hop and sampling.
Yeah.
Moby's Play, which is basically like a pop version of My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. I mean, they were just on fire at this point. They're absolutely one of a band at its pinnacle, and you could just feel it at the time. It's nothing retrospective. You're not looking back and going, oh, wow, they really did hit it. You just knew.
And of course, rhythmically as well, it's incredible because you then, of course, get the Tom Tom Club as well, which is the other side project. And that was fantastic. I mean, Wordy Rapping Hood is one of the best songs of the 1980s.
Yeah.
It really is. And the rhythm on it is magnificent. So you can see exactly where the little offshoots were going as well. They were just funky.
They were unstoppable at the time. And it's also interesting when you hear about how they recorded it. It was recorded part of it was done in Nassau, and then some of it was done in New York, but they just blended all together. I think there was some enmity in the band because they took those grooves, and then Eno and Byrne worked
claimed the credits for it.
Them. Eno did his thing, putting on treatments and taking away sounds and almost like a dub approach to production. And I think the other band members were kind of like, wait, what happened to those loose jams? But you can't argue with the results.
Yeah, because they did originally have all the jams, didn't they? And at one point, I think they weren't getting, I'm not sure now, feel free to correct me. I think it was something to do with the credit, wasn't it? And I think that was obviously one of the big long-term issues of the band. But Rod, what have you? It's 5 stars, isn't it?
5 stars, one of the best albums of all time.
5 stars.
Rod, what have you got at number 1?
Yeah, if anyone else has been counting, mine is I think flip-flopped the opposite to you, Sid. I think my number 1 Speaking in Tongues, again by a cigarette paper. Really, it's probably, I think there's a couple of reasons why I made it number 1. It's got, I think I've mentioned some of my favorite songs. My favorite song of Talking Heads is This Must Be the Place, Naive Melody. It's not that much like a Talking Heads song, really. It's not like any of the other songs, because it's quite mellow. But just the hook, and it's been covered apparently more than any other. So it's been covered by more artists than any other Talking Heads song, which I can sort of understand why, because I just think it's a fantastic song. It's an album closer, which kind of makes it a bit special as well, because it's the last track on the album. But like Jeremy mentioned, it's probably their most. I mean, Little Creatures is more accessible. This is probably their most accessible album, I think. It's less complex, less layered.
I think it's the album I would recommend. Like you say there, if you never heard Talking Heads, give that one as it go as an album without a doubt. I would.
Yeah, I would agree, and I don't make any apologies for that. You've got Remaining Light and Fear of Music are more. Yeah. Bit more high art, arguably, and
I would never say listen to them to start with. Absolutely
absolutely
agree.
Not. But this album is just as excellent and just as much a 5-star album as they are in a different way. It's got more synths on it and less guitars, but it doesn't sound a bit like you. It doesn't necessarily sound more 80s because of that. It just gives it a slightly different feel. Maybe that's a little bit why it makes it a bit more accessible. But you got Burning Down the House, Girlfriend is Better, Slippery People, This Must Be the Place. I mean, people give their right arm to write any of them, and they're all on one album. For example, the whole album's full of great stuff, I think, and like I say, it's got my favourite track on it, and also what I've made a note of here is that I've written to be a creative and critically acclaimed sort of high art artist, if you know what I mean. If you like, you're a creator of high art, and you're creative and complex and certainly not mainstream. But then at the same time, you can be popular and mainstream, and to cross into the mainstream. I've written with basically have basically to do both of those things is such a hard thing to do. To be the other bands I've written down here, I put a la Radiohead, Pink Floyd, David Bowie. They do songs like Life on Mars, Once in a Lifetime, Karma Police.
Right, they're universally.
They're not. They're just three songs off the top of my head, but they're just class songs in a creative sense. That they're as good as any songs, and Comfortably Numb and those sorts of songs. But they cross over into the mainstream, but remain high art. They can be both. There's hardly any other. There's not many bands who can be both things.
Yeah,
and be absolutely excellent.
Yep.
At being a mainstream band and having massive success and chart hits, and yet being seen as one of the most creative and special artists of all time. And they're in that bracket without question. And I've just chose to put their, I suppose, most accessible album ahead of the other two slightly less accessible albums out of those three. But that all three are 5-star and are all awesome.
Yeah, well, I just want to put it out there. I'm not going to disagree with Rod there, because my
no
number
right
one might be number one for today, but quite easily could have been that, quite easily. So it's almost like a joint number one. My other joint number one is Remain in the Light. And as you rightly mentioned, In My Life in Bush of Ghosts has been recorded and benched, as it were. Adrian Belew makes a massive difference on this album, I think. I think he's a huge additional plus after his time with Bowie on 79 and 78 tour as well, of course. He's just great. I love him on this. And can I just also add a big shout out to the King Crimson album, Discipline, which is basically just another offshoot album of this album. It's so, you mentioned the word synergy before, and they're almost symbiotic in terms of albums that they go together hand in hand. So the King Crimson's Discipline, people at the time goes, oh my God, King Crimson have done a Talking Heads album, and you can
really,
absolutely see
some
why.
of them, Gingy, was like Izimbra.
It's such a great
Adrian
album,
Belew,
though. It is such a great album.
What year was that? What year was that, Sid?
I think it's 81. I think it's 81. Jeremy, feel free to correct me there. But
so smack bang in that time.
Yeah,
it was right in there. I know I saw King Crimson on the Beat tour, which was the album. Beat was also very similar to Discipline, a little poppier even. But it was right around then, 1983, 84.
Yeah, September 81 it came out. So banging. And it fits in perfectly. If you've never heard it, go and listen to it, because it fits in perfectly with this album. It is a top album. So so it fits in great with regards to Remain in the Light. And as you've mentioned, all the stuff there, the songs are great on it. The grooves are superb, because originally all the songs were based on grooves that they'd already had. So Born Under the Punches is superb. I mean, it's so catchy, that little weird little sound going on in the background. And I love the slap bass on it. It's fantastic. Cross-Eyed and Painless is like about being paranoid. Another just classic. Great curve, brilliant, great rhythms. Belew's guitars, magnificent. Once in a Lifetime. Oh, sublime. One of the great post-punk songs. Houses in Motion. I love the African groove on it. Seen and Not So Seen, another lovely song. Listening Wind. Lyrically, it's very dark, about colonialism, terrorism. Written from the perspective of a bomber, apparently. Just got a great groove, a great feel. That's what I read anyway. And then the Overload is. I've actually got written here Joy Division in brackets there. It's like sort of going apocalyptic sort of feel to it at the end there. It's just superb. What can you say? Just a truly great album. We've said everything that we want to say with regards to it. For me, there were 4 albums, and I could easily have picked any one of them. But their back catalogue is as good as anybody else's. It's 8 albums, just fantastic. I wish
Yep.
that I still think they've got it in them to make another great album, but I doubt they'll ever go and record again. I suspect
Well, it's
that's it.
interesting because Byrne did do some good collaborations with Eno later on.
Yeah,
That album they made together, Everything That Happens Will Happen Today, was quite good. But that was 2008, so that's a while ago now.
yeah.
I also think we need to give a special mention to the Catherine Wheel score. I was a very lucky kid because my parents took me to see the Catherine Wheel, Twyla Tharp's production with David Byrne's music performed live.
Yes.
And it was so great. And then I bought the cassette because I was going on a cross-country road trip. I had the Catherine Wheel, and then I had No Pussyfooting. Those were the two like pre-recorded cassettes. So maybe I had 2 or 3 others.
Which version of No Pussyfooting was it? Because there's about 20 versions at different speeds.
Whatever you could buy on cassette in 1981 or so. And I just remember those albums. I mean, imagine you're in a bus for, weeks, just looking out the window, watching America go by and listening to those albums. So I always have a very special feel for the Catherine Wheel. And the cassette version had longer takes than the LP version. I did eventually get the LP version because it sort of fell into my hands for free. But I mean, that album to me is at least as good as any of Talking Heads at their best.
Yeah, I haven't listened to that for young, so
And they did a song from it on the Stop Making Sense tour, Big Business, I think it was called. So that was very cool to hear them lay into that. And if you've seen the movie, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
I haven't seen it recently, but I saw it when it came out, and I really would love to go see it in the theater in the new restored 4K, whatever. But I'll probably end up watching it in my living room.
Yeah, because Amazon have uploaded it now as well, and I think it's in 4K. It might be.
I watched it on Prime. I watched it on Prime recently.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my daughter's never seen it, so I know she's definitely got to see that.
Yeah, good.
I just wanted to mention one thing. Desert Island Discs on BBC, which is a famous program. It's been on for years. I know you're in the US, Jeremy, but I remember when Tom York was on it, which was not that long ago, I don't think. His first track was what he said. He basically said that Remain in Light is one of the albums that changes his life, really, along with a couple of others. But so that was his first track that he chose if he was on a desert island, was where he said that album, Remain in Light. And then, so I can't remember who the host was. I think it's Lauren Laverne.
Well, interestingly, Lauren Laverne, I'm good friends with her auntie, Sharon.
Oh, yeah.
I used to work with her, and Sharon, when Lauren Laverne plays Talking Heads on Radio 6, she'll often say, "This is for me, Auntie Sharon."
So when they asked him, it's just interesting, because normally you pick a song, don't you? Because it's a song thing. You top 7 or 8 songs. And he said Remain in Light was an album which changed his life outline. So he said, well, which track of Remain in Light? And he just went, any of them. What he said. He didn't pick a track. He literally just said, it doesn't matter. Any of them. That's exactly what he said. So he went, we'll just play the first one then. So they put the start of the album on.
Yeah.
And they just played the opening, Born
Under Punches.
Born Under Punches first, yeah. That's what they put on. So and he said that's fine, because it just sort of a testament again to how good the album was. He didn't even pick a song off it.
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it?
Said, well, play whatever one you want. They're all equally fantastic. I don't care. And people don't normally say that because they're great best songs, favorite songs of all time. So he had 8 joint best songs of all time off Remain in Light. Which is really interesting.
I have to listen to that out now, because you can go back.
That's really good. He's got some really interesting stuff on there. Neil Young, Ornette Coleman, I think. Anyway, he's got some really interesting picks. Interesting.
We'll check it out. Right, folks. Well, that was fascinating. Some quite divergent and convergent sort of views there. So it's interesting to see what people put on the comments. Obviously, be kind in the comments as usual, folks. You know the rules, you know the score. Remember to subscribe to the channel. We're having something like 25% of people subscribing and not the rest, so please subscribe. And thank you for watching. Leave your comments. And until the next time, from Jeremy, Rod, and myself, take care. Look after yourself. Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye.